Picture an astronaut launching into orbit in 2008. Back on Earth, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Doctor Who are the undisputed pillars of pop culture. Now imagine our astronaut hits a temporal anomaly and returns home 17 years later, landing in 2026. The cultural landscape has shifted. Those foundational sci-fi properties are now struggling to maintain relevance, facing widespread mockery and mounting financial losses. The astronaut naturally expects a golden age. Disney bought Lucasfilm, Paramount expanded Star Trek to multiple streaming shows, and the BBC threw massive budgets at Doctor Who. On paper, the resources for these franchises have never been greater. This trajectory follows a pattern of creative and management decisions that drifted away from the original vision of these universes. It is a transition from mythic storytelling to a different kind of corporate priority. Watching three historic, multi-billion-dollar properties struggle simultaneously provides a clear case study. It illustrates the specific mechanisms that occur when a studio loses its connection to its audience. Notice how the solid, linear timeline of finite storytelling fractures into an endlessly looping web of scattered data nodes. As those nodes morph into fluctuating demographic charts, the audience is categorized as data points managed by algorithms. Large-scale acquisitions put these properties in the hands of executives who prioritized these new metrics. Under leaders like Kathleen Kennedy, the focus shifted toward the needs of the platform rather than the specifics of the established lore. Prioritizing short-term algorithmic performance created a content pipeline that often prioritized the quantity of hours over the quality of the world-building. Within the last 2 years, 3 specific projects arrived as high-stakes tests for their respective franchises: the Acolyte series, Doctor Who Series 15, and Starfleet Academy. Each faced cancellation or major production shifts shortly after release. A common thread across these productions is the allocation of $250 million budgets to creative teams who lean heavily into contemporary social messaging, such as Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies. These properties were marketed with a focus on identity and niche dynamics. Promotional material often emphasized these elements over the core science fiction or adventure narratives that originally defined the brands. Beyond the messaging, there is a recurring pattern of altering the established rules of these classic fictional universes. In Star Wars, a coven of witches uses the Force to conceive life, which complicates the unique nature of Anakin Skywalker's origin. Doctor Who introduced the concept of bi-generation to rewrite the Doctor's timeline, and Star Trek introduced biological traits for the Jem'Hadar that contradicted decades of established species history. Altering decades of continuity to fit new narratives can alienate long-term viewers. When the internal logic of a universe is compromised, the value of the intellectual property itself begins to erode. When fans respond poorly to these changes, the response from production teams is often defensive. Instead of addressing the critiques of the storytelling, the focus shifts toward the audience's reaction. The communication from showrunners and lead actors, such as Ncuti Gatwa, has frequently been confrontational. Specific instances include Gatwa telling dissatisfied viewers to go touch grass, Star Wars actors releasing diss tracks aimed at critics, and members of the Star Trek cast labeling vocal detractors as bigots. This posture positions the studio as an adversary to its own customer base. It reframes a commercial relationship as a cultural conflict. Publicly criticizing the primary consumers of a brand is a high-risk strategy. It often replaces the enthusiasm of a fan base with a lack of interest in future products. These internal studio views are reinforced by external entertainment media. Headlines frequently attribute the failure of a project to toxic fandom or review bombing, rather than examining the viewership data or the quality of the writing. This narrative shifts the responsibility for low ratings away from the studio and onto the audience. It presents the lack of interest as a social problem rather than a product failure. Showrunners have also characterized social media platforms, including Elon Musk's X, as sources of toxicity to explain away negative reception. This creates a feedback loop where executives receive validation from friendly media outlets. This cycle can prevent a studio from seeing the actual reasons why their projects are losing money. Relying on a closed loop of approval ensures that studios continue to produce content that does not align with the preferences of the paying audience. The discrepancy between investment and interest is visible in the data. Projects with 9-figure production budgets have seen average viewership numbers dip into the tens of thousands per episode. The real-world results are clear at headquarters like Paramount. Shows are canceled, sets are dismantled, and companies are forced to write off hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. Public institutions like the BBC are also feeling the pressure. The attempt to broaden the appeal of these shows through modern updates has often resulted in a smaller, less engaged audience. These outcomes demonstrate a fundamental rule of the market. A studio cannot require an audience to buy a product that doesn't meet their expectations. The path forward for these franchises involves a return to the foundational elements of their lore. Rebuilding these pillars requires a focus on storytelling that respects the history of the universe and the intelligence of the audience.